The question is about the Ninth and Tenth Amendment. Why are they important? First, the Ninth Amendment of the Constitution is important because it establishes that you, each person and each person collectively, have all the rights there are, and except the minimal ones that you agree with in signing the Constitution and protecting it, that for the sake of us gathering together, we have given the government limited authority. And it's very limited to actually what the government can do. And when we perceive that the government's first function is to protect you, but protect your rights, and when agents of the government are trespassing in your rights, the Constitution demands that your claim of damage be addressed, not washed away, that you be heard. You have, that gets back to freedom of speech. So the first essential freedoms: freedom of assembly. Here we are, 1, 2, 3, 4, assembled in a room in an apartment house. Then we have freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is the freedom for us to talk about anything, any subject, period, with no prohibition or fear of what anybody who happens to hear us does, acts, or thinks about it. But particularly when we are inside, discreetly inside, quote, our own walls. And then the next absolute freedom that we have, that the government has nothing to say about, is our freedom of religion. And the government has no power to decide what religion is. You as an individual have the right to be and practice your own religion. Now, its credibility is verified when there are more than you that are witnessing and acting out the same. Well, Jesus says that wherever two or more of you are gathered together in my name, there I am with you, the power. Now, when we remember that every single one of us is created in the image of God, and to do the thing that God does, which is actually speak. In the beginning was the Word, that we've all been given this very powerful instrument of our mouths. And the Word of God says, a perfect man is he who can control his tongue. Well, we have not been growing up in a society where we have been instructed correctly and when and where and how to control our tongue.
Back to the 9th and 10th.
The 9th and 10th Amendment covers that, gives us the authority to speak when there is somebody in government or the whole government in error, to informing those around you what that error is, what the hurt is happening because of the misuse of the governmental power by individual X, Y, or Z. You have the right and power to say ouch and stop the train. Be heard. You have, and it's a religious right. It's a fundamental right. It's an absolute right, and to be heard in the presence of another or many others without anybody in the way. And the only excuse for any interruption is that what we're doing is violent. For example, if we are obstructing traffic, that is violence. If we are gathered together so much that people cannot walk up the sidewalk, this is not gentle, this is violent. But if we're in the vacant lot and we're not asking it, we're not screaming and hollering for help, no one has a right to interfere in our Congress, our assembly, our council, whatever you wanted to call, whatever two or more are doing openly, obviously, no ducking or hiding. Now, then we get into discretion. There are times and places for everything. And as a mature person, we know that. But we live in a world where we have not been taught by example from our parents and those around us. And we ourselves are becoming examples, but we are still learning. that what we should have actually received before they ever took us away from their parents and gave us to strangers under compulsory education. That's kidnapping under color of law. To make it a crime. Every teacher that is licensed to teach school is actually a cop. And their job is to police you and decide whether you're truant, whether you're obedient, and put you through psychological tests that you don't even know you're getting and grading you. And the teachers themselves don't really see that. But it's obvious when your kids don't go to school, the truant officer goes and picks up you. Nowadays, they pick up the parents also. You see? But either way, under this false law, unconstitutional law of compulsory education, people in government have presumed that they're the parent of each one of us. It comes out of an old concept when you had kings. And a king, in an ancient kingdom, the people in the kingdom were related to the king. You know, because they were related to the king's family, and they're all part of that farm, that situation. And they weren't big. Kingdoms used to be no bigger than the county of Ulster, you know, or even smaller. Cities were with a lot of people were on less than 100 acres, you know, because the ancient German formula, land plus labor equals wealth. So if you got a few acres, the higher you go in buildings, the more people you can warehouse in those buildings, doing something. Because they have to do something to live. You know, and you got them all, and it's a feedlot. It's just like feeding your cattle all in one place so you can slaughter them. And that's what the cities are created to do, though people don't know it. I shouldn't talk anymore right now. But 9th and 10th Amendment, I go back to it because we didn't go to the 10th. The 10th, 9th particularly protects and stands for the absolute freedoms of you, the people, we the people. The 10th is the corporate sovereignty of the state. It's a corporate sovereignty. Very different than the sovereignty of an individual. It's a synthetic sovereignty. It is a sovereignty created by contracts. This is our state, here's the borders.
It's an agreement.
This is your state, here's the borders.
It's an agreement.
Agreement. It's a contract. It's a covenant. These are all words that apply, but the words covenant imply more than just an agreement. You know, it implies just, you know, it's fundamental. A covenant is fundamental for any conspiracy. When people convene, gather together to accomplish something that they're going to do, and really nobody outside that covenant is in on it. And basically that is how constitutions, all the constitutions, all the governments in the world are created by whoever is the most accomplished businessman on the set of that group of pirates, really, because they all have gathered a great deal more than they would allow anybody else to gather. And if anybody else did gather more, they would take it away from them. That's the purpose of the Federal Reserve Bank. The purpose of the Federal Reserve Bank is to enslave America and divide up the jurisdictions of America to various absentee landlords to be over different counties, different states, or whatever. They'll change the markers anyway. But that's the ongoing history of the world of colonization and mercantile, industrial colonization. So that, in other words, wherever there's any number of people that are now got a good little farm, some traveling salesman is going to find their way there. They're going to sell you something, a sewing machine, a spinning wheel, pots and pans, you know, shoes, and, you know, then as soon as he finds that, but he doesn't want to keep doing that, so he wants to, wherever he finds there's enough people, he wants to have a little warehouse, and then there's a store. And usually he hooks up with a local lady, you know, and she runs the store. And he keeps on the road and then does the next one all the way to wherever he goes. But in any case, in each place he goes, he's got to cut deals. He has to covenant with the people to protect his warehouse, to protect his shit. You know, that's it. You know, and that woman he hooks up with and her kids are working for him, and periodically he'll show around because she's telling him he's always going to be the scary guy. You know, you better have it right when he shows up. You know, but she's the one who decides who's teacher's pet, who needs this, who's up and coming. Anyway, it goes on and on. There's so much, but it's all about freedom of speech. Assembly, that's the first absolute right we need for freedom of survival. When we have a mutual care for one another, and we want to mutually care for, we have to know each other. And we have to care enough about each other to know each other, and then know each other's health. We know when we're doing good. We know when it's bad, so somebody can back you up. Same thing, you know, this little kid is growing a certain way, but he's never going to be able to run like Johnny over here. So he backed up another way by cousins in a close-knit tribal society. You can't really have democracy beyond a certain limit of people, otherwise, because they don't all get heard. Jesus only had 12 disciples. They could grow, they could multiply, they could become fractals, you know, 12 more, 12 more, 12 more. But the reason is because to show people by speech, by conduct, by all these things, what you're talking about. And he spent 3 years amongst a lot of people, but only 120 people stuck with him and were with him at the very end, at his final class. When he told them he was he was going. You know, this after he's resurrected. And he said he's going to send the Holy Spirit to them. 120 men and women of a variety of ages from different sources are all there in that one room for about a month, or at least several weeks. And it says they were of one mind and one accord. They had no argument with anything. Well, that is what it takes. You cannot change the world, but if you change your mind, if you change what's called repentance, that sets up a domino effect within everybody who you touch from then on and who touches you. Just because you're no longer going downhill with the flow, you're a salmon going upstream. And it goes all the way back to Egypt. It's called the Leviathan. You can really read about it in the economic sense by Thomas Hobbes. He hits some money. But the Leviathan is the priesthood of the temple, the priests of money, and all the scribes. You know, the people who are in a position to falsify stories and create new religions because they don't like the priesthood that's in charge right now, so they're going to have a new one. So this is the scribes. They are primarily the eunuchs, the temple servants, who are creating a union, which is a secret order of the elder scribes leading the younger scribes in their daisy chain. Because they're always working for the people that own them, who have cut off their balls and all that stuff. And, you know, if they work good, they get perks that nobody else gets. And they even enjoy life better than the people they're working for. The middlemen, the historic middlemen, you know. And so, yeah, they have been castrated, and they are castrators, you know, as are the women who don't need any extra men. They already got enough guys working it. They don't want any cowboys fighting against each other. So the best thing to do is deball them when you see you're going to have too many boys, you know. And that's the way they did it throughout history.
Really?
Yeah, they just made them.
About that.
Yeah, in the religious circles, for example, the temples of Greece. Let's say the virgin, the women attending the Temple of Delphi. Okay, the oracle is a woman and all of her servants, but they are surrounded by the guard, the wolf soul, the Lupercali, the lupo. We got Lupa, the Lupa wolf. And these are guys with the whips, and they protect the temple. They protect every marketplace, because in Rome, the real religion in Rome is business. The Romans actually didn't believe in supernatural gods. They're very superstitious. But Mercury, for example, and Mars, both are the maintainers of the market, the mercado, you know, yeah, you know, you're not supposed to interrupt the girls, man, at the tables, you know, and all this kind of stuff, and you know, they're the what do you call it in the churches, ushers, you know, but progressively heavy, you know, like nobody wants to bring the gorillas in right in the middle of tables and furniture and glass, and no, unless there's really a need, but. They got progressively, they got the first, when you go into these kind of village situations, first thing you meet is the dogs. Then you meet the kids. Then you meet the old ladies. And then you meet some of the older men. And last you meet the beauties, you know, who they're hiding.
How does the Ninth and 10th Amendment relate to all of this?
Ninth and 10th Amendment, that it's for governors. The Ninth Amendment says that the people have all the rights, but since our rights and our jurisdictions, we only have them if there's an us. When you're by yourself, you're outnumbered. You know, you can try, but if nobody agrees on your rights, you lost them. It takes more than just you feeling like you are it. You know, that's biologic, you know.
Does that mean jury of peers, then?
Huh?
Is that what's meant by jury of peers?
Yes. At the beginning of it, yes. And that's why dueling, for example, was and never lawful except when it was between peers. People of equal economic position and position in the importance in the community. It was never right for a rich man to duel with a poor man. Either one would be the murderer of the other. It was absolutely not correct. They were not on equal standing at all.
But for an equal to kill each other is okay.
Yeah, exactly. Like, for example, let's just say in the club, everybody got to be tough.
What was it? Burr and Hamilton shot it out, right?
That's right. Oh yeah, and Hamilton won.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, and mainly the real last of the duels were amongst newspaper people, because their credibility was being challenged by somebody else.
Oh.
And so that's why a man's honor was based upon a man is only as good as his word.
Wow.
See, and so if you're really on my case so much, man, step out. And if you're really trying to destroy me, and it appears you're destroying my life, my business, my family, then you got to kill me, or I got to kill you.
Wow.
And that's how it is, because he ain't going to stop.
But today, newspaper men tell lies.
Well, they
so
always
they don't
have. That's that they ever told the truth. It isn't doctors ever, as any group, there's never been any honest group.
So you mean people would die for a lie?
Yeah, sure. It's because their pride is involved. They've built their whole business, their whole system, their whole credibility on their bullshit. And what they got
on their word.
Yeah, on their word. And so when it's established that their word is no word, then they're finished. They know they're finished.
Right.
They're not going to get the money. They're not going to get the girls. They're not going to get anything that they ever wanted and had. Yeah, because there is a dimension in the world where you're only as good as your word. And there are people that literally that we did and does and will continue to make very big deals just in a conversation like we're having right now. Don't even have to shake their hand. I hear it. I say, oh, you need something. Boom, it's dropped off. You hear it. Oh, I need something. Boom. We didn't make any deal to do that. But we've already agreed in our mind and know it. And that can happen all over the world. I can meet people that I've never, ever met in my life. And they're lifelong friends from the moment I met them. Because, it isn't figuring out that he has met a number of people like this, of different ages.
Well, it seems that's the kind of law we need, not to have war with China, so that even though we don't share the same constitution, they don't have.
We're not going to have a war with China. The United States and China and Russia and Northern Europe are all going to be absolutely united against Islam. There is not going to be a war with China at all. China is not a threat, doesn't want to be a threat, got plenty of problems at home. But for the sake of the terrorists in the minds of the people who publish things, they are creating China as the next potential enemy. Now, that's not the way the Chinese work. The Chinese...
Do you think they'll see past the swindle of buying into the Federal Reserve?
The Chinese are way smarter than any of us, man. They're in on it. They know it. Are you kidding? They've been in San Francisco since the gold came. The Bank of Canton is a Chinese bank. Chinatown is the biggest Chinese in San Francisco, the biggest Chinese population in the United States and anywhere in the world outside of China. And they have become very rich. They're buying up all of San Francisco. Chinese are buying up property, but I'm talking, they're Chinese.
But they always tended to get more into real estate. That was precisely my point.
Whereas they're doing it.
More of the white people. Let me finish. More of the white people were staying in, getting more involved in these fraudulent deals, like you were saying, where someone would die for their reputation.
Yeah.
Even if they knew their reputation was based on fraud, they would die for it. But meanwhile, if the Chinese were actually investing in hard assets like real estate or laundromats, they weren't in the clubs, the daisy chain clubs.
Well,
so
that's
now
not
it
true.
seems as
the world is. I have to tell you, the world is ruled by crime, and all the crime lords that are actually crime lords do know each other and each other's territory. The Chinese are everywhere in the world, but not all of the Chinese. But they're active buyers and sellers.
But here's my point. The crime can only a society can only sustain so much crime before it destroys that society.
China has gone through more of those changes than any society in the world. They know that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the Chinese that were in America, because my friend Buck told me that his grandfather worked on the railroad, or maybe great-grandfather.
Yeah.
And when they got to California, there was such racism that they fired them all, and then they got Irish people to come in just as they're going in the home stretch. Meanwhile, the Chinese took back a little bit of gold that they made for this hard labor of having brought the tracks from the East Coast to the West Coast. Then that little bit of gold, what my friend Buck told me, is going back to China. His family could move from a lower caste instantly into the landed caste.
That's true.
Well,
the ones that have stayed here are immensely wealthy. The families that came here with the gold rush, are the ones that are fronting for the rest to come.
But they were doing such practical things. He said that if he had a deadbeat tenant, instead of taking him to court, he would move his mother-in-law next door, who had her chickens, and the roosters crowing in the morning would drive the tenants away.
Sure.
These are very, you know what I mean? Very simple.
Every single group has some way of pushing, sneaking, bullying to expand their colony.
But I'm saying he didn't depend on any crime groups or any connections.
You didn't hear about it. He didn't talk to you about anything like that. And he wouldn't. You wouldn't hear about that. You wouldn't hear about. I'll tell you. So I can tell you because I know a lot about the deep and I've really been moved to study the Chinese in California, and basically they had the candy stores
and the laundromats
but well, in the very beginning they provided the vegetables. They for the miners and the lumber people. And everybody that had a fancy house had a Chinese cook. They had Chinese servants. And those people learned everything about the people they were working for and moved on. Then they always have been dedicated to education. So you don't come out of Chinatown stupid.
Or uneducated.
Huh?
Uneducated.
Uneducated to both Chinese and the world around you.
And usually in the sciences, engineering, practical sciences.
Yes, for those because they have an aptitude and the cultivation of practical bean counters. Counting beans then it easily becomes counting beads, from beans to beads. The rugs, the keeping track of the inventory, where it is, where it's going.
Okay, so how does this affect our 9th and 10th Amendments? Even though it's a different, because...
The 9th and 10th Amendment, to me, it validates my freedom of religion to grow and share cannabis. Share it, whether I'm giving it or whether I'm selling it.
Well, there you go. The cannabis seeds came from China. Didn't Thomas Jefferson smuggle them in from China?
He smuggled seeds out of China.
Yeah.
Very expensive seeds.
So there you go.
Where you go? Where you go? Where?
The connection.
Oh, yeah.
The Chinese culture and our culture will meet at this very high level.
Well, they have been meeting at that very high level. The people that actually made the money on the opium trade, who basically live up and down the Hudson River and over around Massachusetts, those people traveled, went to China, valued the artifacts that they brought down China, and even intermarried. A lot of Germans and Russians have intermarried with the Chinese. A lot of everybody, man. They have been the oldest, biggest merchants on earth.
Wow. So this is a real melting pot that's at a pivotal point to either ascend or descend.
For the Chinese, the dragon is good news. And that's all the Chinese, it's the people passing the bucket, the fire brigade. Here, I give you the bucket of water, you don't go anywhere, you just hand it to the next person. Well, that's the Chinese dragon, hand to hand. And they could definitely have a ring around the entire world with people. They have enough people to do that. Hey, holding hands.
Did you know that the American Bar Association is a communist organization? It's a 501c3 religious organization, and they have the code of ethics of the Communist Party. Considering that the American Bar is communist, we always think of China as a communist country, freshly out of that.
Actually, it's China. China uses a modern communist formula to relate to the whole world. But China is always China first. It has nothing to do with any theory of governance.
I see.
And at any given time, it can have any form of governance.
Well, how about us right now? We seem so extremely corporate, and the world is, and our country's
suffering. That's on purpose. That's the British work, divide and conquer. And that's the Jesuits, and then then the British became the hotbed of the secret Catholics when it was illegal to be a Catholic, and so the secret Catholics began to operate in with the secret Jews in the middle of the British court.
Well, I was just suggesting that the difference in the Chinese culture and our culture may not be that big a difference as the difference between indigenous cultures and corporate cultures. That in a tribal sense, we could all be very united and very similar.
Chinese can march in unison easier than we can. They can cooperate with each other.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because
it's neither good nor bad. It's just a fact.
So, insofar as a system can become too corporate, you don't want too much marching in line without questioning. But on the other hand, you can accomplish a lot when people are working together.
That's all fine, and that's what every school teacher would teach. But in the nature of life, it's not like that. People don't ever work with each other. Even the Chinese who do it so well because they are habituated so long,
Are they repressed?
Well, of course.
So what do you think the flower of any culture is, and all the different ones?
It's as temporary as any flower.
So
it is not going to last.
Then what about this yearning for world peace?
It is a synthetic yearning. It's an abstract idea that never happened and will never happen, but it is held by...
Well, no, I think the yearning is authentic.
The
yearning's not synthetic.
I didn't put down the yearning. I say, but it's not true. It's not yearning for a true goal. It's not recognizing gravity. It's not recognizing mortality. It's not recognizing the nature.
Then what's the highest aspiration, if not world peace and harmony?
Well, the highest aspiration for those that have it is the aspiration to be one with the Creator, the mystic.
Right.
But that very few people have either the initial aptitude. There are movements. There are things where individuals and groups of individuals have been a model, and they have influenced the majority, a larger mass around them.
So you're kind of saying that the yearning for world peace is childish because it's impossible.
Well, yeah, because we don't yearn it enough to make it where we are.
Well, then what would the masters like Jesus?
Huh?
Wouldn't that be what the masters would cultivate, to make that yearning into something practical, so that you would see it just as logical as a good business deal?
Here's why it is faulted. The world, as described by the word, which I'm convinced is right, is simply the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And these are the root of all the reasons why there's individual and collective behavior, such as what you've been documenting in the studio. That's a model of all the reasons why they can say peace, peace, when there is no peace. The people saying it don't have it. But they don't have it because they're not at peace with God. And there's no way you can make a government or a law that's going to make people peaceful. All law can do is arm more people and arm the army. The law can never save anybody, can't secure anything, can't protect the president who's going to die by an assassin. It can't do that.
All right.
And so people that want to make that's why I came to a dispute with Mario Savio and Jerry Rubin when they came over to our Oracle office, because I said, you guys are just cops, man, and you're no better than the ones we got.
Explain that.
Well, just that. They want to be the dictators. They want to shape it and change it, and who's in and who's out.
And when you told Mario Savio he was just another cop, what was his reaction to that?
Well, his reaction was, I'm just a stone hippie, man, and they actually were telling people that we were working for the government with our drugs, and destroying their revolution,
When maybe quite the opposite was true.
They had no damn revolution.
Aha.
They didn't have the thought. We visibly, without even knowing it, were changing the world by our example. I mean, we were all a bunch of naive kids. I was a little older. But basically...
Because that's what Joe believes.
Yeah.
And but I can't think the question now is, were the hippies naive?
Sure they were. I was. I was naive and I was lustful, but I had no idea how things were being run. I had no idea where my ideas and concepts were coming from. Yeah.
And so as you got older and wiser, you learned?
Weeks putting paperwork in, making sure everything was tight, and then we wrote a letter to the clerk saying, we just put in a summons into the case, and the case is ready to move forward. We require 2 copies to be prepared, 2 complete copies to be prepared with the summons that's already in the case to be delivered to the sheriff for execution on the parties through process service. And that's when they started throwing a fit. You can't bring the Smith court into our courthouse, and we have a problem with this. And they never put that on paper. Those were the discussions. And so, rather than flip out, I just took my time, took a deep breath, figured out what to write next, and just kept going at it. And finally, they stepped into it. They finally put it on paper that they've trespassed on the case. So now we're looking for the claims adjuster. So that's where we're at. But it is frustrating.
Hey Gus, can I just ask you a question about that?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay, so and I'm just asking. I'm not even sure I'm going in the right direction, but technically, aren't they correct? Like if they say that you can't put your case in their court, it seems to me that would be a correct statement for them to say. Contrast with you can put your case in the public courthouse. Their fictional court, whatever that is, the state of Vermont, district court, I don't know what it is. Wouldn't they be correct in saying that?
Oh, absolutely. And they're saying that, they specifically mean the courthouse. The conversations that the lady had with them, right up front, she had one conversation, and then we went to courthouse. We went to putting everything in writing. Told her, look, we need everything in writing, and that was the last time they mentioned anything about that subject. But yes, absolutely correct. It's they're talking about their courthouse and not their court, because when you're in their court, you got to follow their rules.
And I know you know that. I'm bringing it up so people who are listening can understand. There's only a limited number of ways they try to trick you. When they did that to me in both of my cases, and so I just wrote back to them and say, I'm not trying to put my court into your court. I'm putting my case is in my court at the location of the public courthouse known as, and I explain it to them. They see that, I think once they see that you're diffusing their silly little childish tricks, they start to lose ammunition and hope really quick.
Or if you could, John, explain what happened to that. I mean, you tried to submit it through the post office. They rejected it. You've tried all sorts of things, and then you went in there face-to-face last week. Well, this past week. Go ahead and explain what happened at that courthouse, because that was a great story.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in a nutshell, first off, I mailed my claim in by registered mail, which should have worked. But their internal policy is the clerk takes your case. Now, keep in mind, these guys don't see common law cases, so it's like they have a mental habit. Every time a case comes in, they follow a certain procedure, and that procedure is they take your case and they immediately send it over to a magistrate. It's immediate. They assign it in the computer, and it goes over to a magistrate for review to make sure it has the basic ingredients to be a case. And if it doesn't, then they're going to reject it, or they're going to tell you what conditions you have to satisfy. Keep in mind, they're looking through the lens of a complaint. Okay, that's what they're used to. They're not used to seeing a claim. So as a matter of habit, that's what they did to my claim, is they sent it over to a magistrate without any authority or authorization from me to allow anybody, even themselves, to look at my case. My case is my property.
Hey,
Nobody
Gus.
has the right. Go ahead.
Is Gus there?
Yeah.
Hey, Gus, call me up on the phone and I'll give you my password thing, and you just run the show if you want to. Do you want to finish doing this anymore?
Yeah, I can do that.
All right.
All right.
Yeah, I'll let you do it. Yeah, I'm gonna call in the night, man. You know, people gotta get.
I'll call you up. Hold on.
All right. Goodbye.
Go ahead, John. I'll be right back.
Okay. So I'm going to try to keep this brief for the lesson value in it. A lot of detail. So anyway, they send my claim over to the magistrate. The magistrate has this fill-in-the-blank standard form that the court uses to reject filings. So the magistrate very cleverly checked off these boxes and cited these federal rules of civil procedure for why my claim could not be accepted. One of the reasons was that it didn't include the original complaint. Another reason was that it didn't meet the ingredients of a complaint according to certain federal rules of civil procedure. But interestingly, the guy contradicted himself because he checked off a box that said a claim and a counterclaim must bear the full caption, meaning plaintiff versus defendant. But the interesting thing is he checked off a box that called it a claim. So in his own document, he was making a distinction between a claim and a complaint, which is, really powerful. I mean, that's very, very important because you have their acknowledgement, and he signed this document that he was in receipt of a claim. So anyway, long story short, without going into too much of the detail, first of all, he committed mail fraud because I sent it registered mail with instructions to deliver it into the record. So when they obstruct mail, that carries 15-year penalty, by the way, under the statutes at large. So I didn't go down that route. I could have done a mail fraud report. So what I did instead is I went down, and this time I just did what I had mailed to them was a full detailed claim with all the exhibits. Very short and brief, but I had the normal exhibits in there. But this time I just went down in person with a single page, and I only had 8 words on there. It just said, I am man, John, claim the wrong of trespass. That's all I had, and I signed it. And so the rest is what I think Gus wanted me to share, which is I go to the clerk's office, and it's a 45-minute ordeal. So I don't want to go over the whole thing, but the basic nutshell was the first woman didn't want to file it because she never saw anything like that. First of all, she never saw anything titled claim. Secondly, that it only had 8 words on it. And thirdly, that I was dressed in casual clothes. I didn't look like an attorney. So one by one, they kept bringing out higher and higher experienced clerks until there was about 5 of them out there. And they kept calling my document a complaint and that it had to be reviewed by a magistrate. And I said, well, I don't give you permission to let anybody read my complaint, not even you. I'm requiring that you file this and give me a file number. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. And I said, well, then I need the man or woman's name who is accepting liability for obstructing my claim and blocking my access to a public courthouse. And the woman actually said to me, this is not a public courthouse. And I said, so you're giving me legal advice? And she said, no, I'm not giving you legal advice. I said, well, you have already several times. You've called my claim a complaint, and you've told me this isn't a public courthouse. So I said, do you even know what complaint means? And this is why you folks need to learn words and what they mean. Very important. I mean, at least the basics, because they'll always shoot themselves in the foot. So I said, well, you're saying this document, this piece of paper, is a complaint, and you're entitled to your belief, but what is a complaint? Can you tell me what you mean by that? And she said, yeah, it's a document that tells a story of somebody who got hurt and gives the details like on or about a certain date, a certain harm happened. She actually used that word, which I thought was interesting. And I said, okay, but what does the word complaint mean? The actual word in the English language, what does it mean? And they were all looked at each other like somebody farted. They had no idea. So I said, well, let me tell you what it means. It means somebody who is wailing or crying. I said, does that document look like it's wailing or crying right now? And they wouldn't answer me. I said, do I look like I'm wailing or crying right now? And they said, no. So I guess you could pretty much surmise that this is not a complaint. And I said, if you want to double check me, I'll give you 2 etymology websites to go look it up on right now. I'm not in a hurry. I'll stand here and wait. And, of course, they didn't do it. So I said, so then they got smart, and they said, well, it's a pleading. And I said, oh, a pleading. Are you sure about that? Do you mean pleading, spelled P-L-E-A-D-I-N-G? Is that what you're saying? See, I'm pinning them down. And they said, yeah, it's a pleading. And all pleadings have to be run by the magistrate for a review. And I said, okay, well, maybe that's true. I don't know. But this is not a pleading. It's a claim. And I said, do you know what pleading means?
Yeah, I ain't begging.
What's that?
I ain't begging. I'm not pleading. I'm not begging anything.
Right. And well, specifically, the root word of pleading is to plead. And plead means to beg, like you just said. It also means grief. So I just went through the same exercise with them again. Do I look like I'm begging, or does my document sound like it's begging? So we went through this exercise. Finally, the logic is I used their own information that they were proffering and fed it back to them in the form of a question. And so what ultimately happened was, and I'm cutting the story really short, is the woman said to me, well, we're going to take it, we're going to stamp it, but the magistrate's just going to reject it. And I said, well, I have a remedy for that. And you can let the magistrate know that. You can also let the magistrate know, and I require you to let him or her know, that I do not give anyone permission to read my claim. It's my property. Trespass is theft. Use of somebody else's property without authorization is theft. Look up the definition of theft. That was the last word I had with them when they gave me my number and I walked out. So the lesson in the story is, a lot of times it works when you mail it. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you have to go in there. If you go in there, they're going to razzle-dazzle you, and you better know some of these words, and you better not let them put you on the defense with their questions. You got to keep them on the defense. And so the way you do that is you've got to know what these words mean. And some of the key words, just to recap, is, and by the way, what the definition of claim is a demand by right. And they didn't know that. So I gave them that. So those 3 words, claim, complaint, and pleading, or the root word plead, were very instrumental in them feeling compelled to stamp my document. So, and there's more to the story that's interesting. I just don't want to, take up the whole night in case somebody has a question. But that was a real experience that just happened last Friday.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was going to say you're right damn on, John. And as people start to immerse themselves in this type of lifestyle, you start to realize that every word has a particular and specific meaning. Words are to be used with an exact meaning and an exact use. You can basically say that every word that's ever been created has some type of specific use, like a tool, like a scalpel. And every word that you use, whether verbally or in writing, should be used that way, like you're performing an operation. One word can be the scalpel, one word can be the clamp. And that's the way you really have to look at it. And while you're looking at different ways of researching how to live this way, one thing would be to grab a dictionary. Just research your words, because every word has a specific meaning, or else it wouldn't be given its own word.
Right. Someone has a great question on the board, which is a really good question. Did I mention common law? Actually, I didn't. And it probably would have been a good idea, but here's what I did do, is I said, right now, I am being harmed by another man, and my property is being injured and subject to theft. So you have to make a decision as a public servant in this public courthouse. Are you going to aid that by blocking me from filing my claim for justice in this public courthouse? Are you going to be an accomplice? That's the question before you today. And that, I think, really stimulated them to think hard about what they were doing. So, yeah, it would have been good to mention the common law, but I was trying to keep it focused. I was on what they were saying and then flipping it back on them rather than going sideways on other issues. Not that the other issues wouldn't have been valuable, but that was the strategy that I think was effective, is flipping back onto them in the form of a question what they were saying. And you're right, the words are like surgical tools.
Yep.
As long as you put them in the form of a question.
Yep. And it's always beneficial to usually answer questions with a question as well too. I mean, a lot of what I've learned over the years, and I spent a lot of years in sales careers, and usually every bit of sales training that I ever went through over the course of my life, whether it was Dale Carnegie or anything like that, was that whoever is asking the questions controls the conversation. And that can be no better used in a situation when you're dealing with a public servant, because if you're going to basically allow them to hang themselves, and so if you're asking the right questions, just like how you were putting it, with putting the onus on them and putting the liability on them, then they're just either going to sink or swim on their own. And just if like Brad Pitt said in the movie Moneyball, when your enemies, when your opponent's making mistakes, just let them continue to make mistakes. And that's the best way to do it. Is just hit them with a question. Just hit them with a question when they're trying to come at you and attack you. Come right back at them with a question and let them tie their own noose.
Now, since you brought that up, because that's an excellent point. Dale Carnegie. If there's anybody on this call who hasn't read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, you're really missing out. First of all, it's the number 2 selling book of all time, second only to the Bible. Mm-hmm. And I've taken their management courses, and I've taken their public speaking courses, because I did a lot of public speaking back in the 90s. And don't forget the other principle that he teaches, which is just as important. I don't mean you, sir. I mean the other people who are listening, which is you always let the other person save face. Mm-hmm. In other words, when I'm giving you this information kind of aggressively and quickly now, but when I was there, I spoke firmly, but I didn't do it with a tone of voice or an inflection in my voice that was anxious to set them up for failure. I did it in a consultative, kind of empathetic mode. When I would say to the woman, why are you calling my document a complaint? You obviously have a belief that you're grounded in. I would like you to share that with me, just in case you're correct. I don't believe you're correct, but why are you calling it a complaint? And so she would give me her reason. I let her talk herself out. Then I'd dig a little deeper. So I'd say, so you're saying that I need to tell a story, and I need to say how I was harmed and on what date and who did the harm. And so that's your belief. Is that correct? And she said, yes. And, of course, all the clerks are all bobbing their head up and down. Oh, wow, this woman's doing a great job. And I said, well, and so that's when I said, okay, so now I have your definition. I'd like to give you mine. It's actually not mine. It comes from the English language, which is approved by Congress every so many years, and it comes from etymology. The dictionaries are written from etymology dictionaries. So I went back to the etymology of the word, its actual root, where it came from. Did it come from French, Greek, Latin? And I went back to that root. And so here's what that says. And so you make it impossible for them to fight it. You've given them a chance to say their piece, and they, of course, it's an opinion. They actually didn't look up the word, and now I'm bringing them into, okay, here's what the English language definition is of that word, and here's the history of the word and where it came from. I'll stand here and wait while you look it up. Here's Oxford's Dictionary's website. I brought it with me, by the way, for etymology. Here's Johnson's etymology website, and here's etymology online. And I took the paper, I flipped it into the over-the-counter to them. I said, I'll stand right here while you look it up. And I did it very nicely, not like a wise guy, not shoving it down their throat, because then people, put up their guard.
Yeah, you don't want to take a dominant position. You want to take a moderate or a recessive type position, because if you allow them access to do it, that they will guide you. Anybody will guide you through any type of situation. Just just asking the right questions and just taking that stance. And the less dominant that you appear, the more they'll guide you. Plus, also people too. Regardless of what type of situation you're in, whether it's dealing with a public servant or anything else, most people love to talk about themselves. Most people love to just go on and on and on. And if you let them, they'll do it.
Right. Right. Now, on the flip side, since we're on the subject, I had a totally different experience when I went in the following Monday to file some other documents. And I handled it a whole different way. So you need to be a little flexible. I went in, years ago, I used to do subdivisions. And I learned from an old timer, whenever you go in front of a zoning board or a planning board and you want a development approved, and I've done many of these, you always want to give them at least one, preferably two or three things to say no to. Because that's the business they're in. They're in the business of saying no. So when I went in there, and I didn't do this on purpose, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but I relearned an old lesson. I went in to file my claim, my more detailed claim, because the story I just told was filing my one-page claim. Now I went back to file the claim that they had rejected and mailed back to me. And so when I went in there, this really nasty, militant type woman comes out and says, "Oh, we're not going to give you a certified copy." And I said, "Oh, why is that?" And she said, "Because the magistrate hasn't approved this." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I've not come across that before." And of course, in my mind, all I was after was the case number. So I had to make a really quick decision on my feet. Do I want to stand here and go through that same exercise with her and risk not walking out of there with my claim number, or make her feel like she got a win and get my claim number? So I rolled the dice. And Kyle probably would have done it differently and in a better way. But I just said, well, I take issue with that, but let's just do it your way. And I assumptively said, for the moment, and I'll take my claim number and I'll stand over here in the corner like a corrected student and think about what you're doing to me. So she turned to the other clerk, the lower clerk, and she said, "Give him his claim number." So I didn't give a rat's ass about getting a certified copy. It just would have been nice, but I don't really care. So I got my claim number and I got a file stamp. So that's another strategy. Sometimes you don't want to argue over something that's not crucial. And so that I walked out of there with my claim number.